The silence of space was broken by the steady hum of the Zephyrian research vessel, Harmony's Edge. Captain Veltar stood on the bridge, his blue-scaled hands gripping the command rail as he watched the viewscreen. 3 days into their mission, to explore the Outer Rim territories, they had found something unexpected. "Captain, the object is definitely artificial," reported Chief Science Officer Kethron from his station. His large golden eyes reflected the light from his instruments. "The metal shows signs of advanced construction, but the design is unlike anything in our databases." Veltar nodded slowly. The Zephyrians had been exploring space for over 2,000 years, and they knew most of the ships used by the various species in the galaxy. This vessel was different. It was long and narrow, built for speed rather than comfort. Parts of its hull were torn open, exposing twisted metal and frozen debris that glittered in the starlight. "Any life signs?" Veltar asked. Kethron checked his readings again. "The ship appears to be dead, sir. Most compartments show signs of decompression, but there is one section deep inside that still has power and atmosphere." "Interesting." Veltar turned to his communications officer. "Send word to the Science Council. We may have found something important." The Harmony's Edge moved closer to the derelict vessel. Through the viewscreen, they could see the damage more clearly. Whatever had happened to this ship, it had been catastrophic. The front section was completely gone, torn away as if by some massive explosion. The middle section was riddled with holes, probably from debris or weapons fire. Only the rear third of the ship remained intact. "Captain," Kethron called out, excitement clear in his voice. "I'm reading symbols on the hull. They match records from our historical archives." Veltar's crest rose slightly, a sign of surprise among his people. "Show me." The viewscreen zoomed in on a section of the hull where faded letters were still visible. The symbols were worn and damaged, but they could still be read. "EDF Salvation. Earth Defense Force," Kethron whispered. "Captain, this is a human ship." A hush fell over the bridge. Every Zephyrian knew about humans, though few had ever seen one. They were legendary figures in galactic history, a species that had burned bright and fast before disappearing completely. According to all records, the last human colonies had fallen 300 years ago, destroyed by war and disease. Their homeworld of Earth was now a lifeless rock, orbiting a dying star. "Are you certain?" Veltar asked. "The design matches our historical files perfectly," Kethron confirmed. "This is definitely a human vessel, probably from their final era judging by the advanced hull materials." Veltar made his decision quickly. "Prepare a boarding party, full environmental suits and safety protocols. If there are any human artifacts aboard, the Science Council will want them preserved." 2 hours later, Veltar led a small team through the airlock connecting their ship to the human vessel. The artificial gravity was weak but functional, and their boots made soft metallic sounds as they walked through the corridors. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows on the walls, and their helmet lights revealed rooms filled with floating debris. "The humans certainly built their ships to last," commented Dr. Yilsha, the team's medical officer. She was examining a control panel that still showed faint readings despite centuries of abandonment. "This technology is remarkably advanced for a species that existed so long ago." They made their way deeper into the ship, following Kethron's scanner readings toward the source of power. The corridors were narrow by Zephyrian standards, built for beings smaller than themselves. Human writing covered various panels and walls, though most of it was too faded to read clearly. "Here," Kethron announced, stopping in front of a heavy door marked with warning symbols. "The power source is directly behind this barrier." The door was sealed, but their cutting tools made quick work of the locking mechanism. As it slid open, cold air rushed out, carrying with it the smell of metal and something else they couldn't identify. The room beyond was unlike anything they had expected. Instead of engines or power cells, they found themselves looking at a medical bay. The walls were lined with complex equipment, most of it still functioning. In the center of the room stood a single cylindrical chamber, roughly the size of a Zephyrian but shaped differently. "It's a cryogenic preservation unit," Dr. Yilsha said, her voice filled with wonder. "And it's still active." They approached. the chamber carefully. Through the transparent aluminum window, they could see a figure inside. It was definitely humanoid, but smaller than a Zephyrian, with pale skin and brown hair. The being was wearing what appeared to be a military uniform, though the style was unfamiliar. "Captain," Kethron said, studying his instruments. "The chamber's systems show that this individual has been in suspended animation for approximately 3 centuries. The preservation process appears to have been successful." Veltar stared at the figure in the chamber. A living human, the first one any of them had ever seen. According to every record they possessed, humans were extinct. Yet, here was proof that at least one had survived, frozen in time aboard this derelict vessel. "Can we revive him safely?" Veltar asked. Dr. Yilsha ran her scanners over the chamber. "The human appears to be in excellent condition. Our medical databases include some information about human physiology from historical exchanges with their species. I believe we could attempt revival, but it would be safest to do it aboard our ship, where we have full medical facilities." "Is that wise?" asked Lieutenant Morex, the team's security officer. "We know nothing about this individual or why he was placed in stasis." Veltar considered this carefully. The Zephyrians prided themselves on being a peaceful and helpful species. They had good relationships with most of the galaxy's civilized races, built on trust and mutual cooperation. Finding a survivor of humanity's downfall seemed like a gift, an opportunity to learn about a lost civilization, and perhaps make amends for the galaxy's failure to help them in their final days. "We'll bring him aboard," Veltar decided. "The Science Council will want to study this discovery, and if we can successfully revive him, imagine what we might learn about human history and culture." It took several hours to carefully disconnect the cryogenic chamber from the ship's systems and transport it to the Harmony's edge. Dr. Yilsha worked with a team of technicians to integrate the human preservation unit with their medical bay, ensuring that all the life support systems remained stable during the transfer. Once everything was ready, Dr. Yilsha began the revival process. The procedure was delicate, requiring precise adjustments to temperature, atmosphere, and various chemical balances. The human's body had to be slowly brought back from its frozen state without causing damage to his organs or nervous system. "His vital signs are strengthening," Dr. Yilsha reported as she monitored the process. "Heart rate is increasing, brain activity is returning to normal levels. I think it's working." Captain Veltar watched through the medical bay's observation window as the human's eyes began to flutter. After 300 years of silence, this member of a lost species was about to return to consciousness. The implications were staggering. They might be witnessing the return of humanity to the galaxy. The human's eyes opened slowly, blinking in the bright lights of the medical bay. He looked around in confusion, his gaze taking in the unfamiliar surroundings and the strange faces. Looking down at him, when he tried to speak, only a weak croak came out. "Easy," Dr. Yilsha said in her gentlest voice, though she knew he couldn't understand her language yet. "You're safe. We're here to help you." The human's eyes focused on her face, taking in her blue scales and golden eyes. His expression showed surprise but not fear. After a moment he managed to speak in a hoarse whisper. "Where am I?" Dr. Yilsha activated her translation device, though it would take time to fully adapt to the human's language patterns. For now, she could only offer simple words and gestures to show that they meant no harm. Captain Veltar smiled, his crest rising with pleasure. They had done something remarkable today. They had brought a human back from the edge of death, rescued a survivor of a lost civilization. The Science Council would be amazed, and the galaxy would have a chance to learn from this living piece of history. If only they had known what they were really unleashing, they might have left Jake Morrison frozen in his chamber forever. Jake Morrison woke up feeling like he had been hit by a transport shuttle. His muscles ached, his throat was dry, and everything seemed too bright. But he was alive, and that was more than he had expected when he first entered the cryo chamber. 3 centuries ago, the blue-scaled beings who had found him were called Zephyrians, and they seemed friendly enough. Dr. Yilsha, the medical officer who had supervised his revival, checked on him every few hours. She spoke in a melodic language that his translation device slowly began to understand. Captain Veltar visited him once a day, asking simple questions about his health and comfort. "How do you feel today, Jake Morrison?" Dr. Yilshaw asked as she entered his recovery room. The translation device made her voice sound slightly mechanical, but Jake could hear the genuine concern underneath. "Better, thank you," Jake replied, sitting up in his bed. "The headaches are getting weaker." "That is good. Your body is adjusting well to being awake again." Dr. Yilshaw made notes on her medical tablet. "Tomorrow, if you feel strong enough, Captain Veltar would like to show you our ship. Would you like that?" Jake nodded. He had been in this medical bay for 5 days now, and he was getting restless. The Zephyrians had been nothing but kind to him, but he needed to understand his situation better. Where was he? What had happened? To humanity? How long had he really been asleep? The next morning, Captain Veltar came to escort him on his tour. The Zephyrian captain was tall and dignified, with deep blue scales that caught the light as he moved. His golden eyes showed warmth and intelligence. "Welcome to the Harmony's Edge," Veltar said as they walked through the corridors. "This is a research vessel. We explore new regions of space and study interesting phenomena." Jake looked around with genuine curiosity. The ship was much larger than the human vessels he remembered, with wide corridors and high ceilings. The walls were covered with soft materials that glowed with a gentle light. Everything seemed designed for comfort and efficiency. "It's beautiful," Jake said, and he meant it. "Very different from human ships." "We believe that a comfortable crew is a productive crew," Veltar explained. "Tell me, what were human ships like?" Jake described the cramped military vessels he remembered, built for war rather than exploration. He talked about Earth, about the colonies, about the final, desperate battles against enemies he couldn't quite remember clearly. The memories felt fuzzy, like looking through dirty glass. "I'm sorry for your loss," Veltar said softly. "From our records, it seems humanity faced great challenges in their final years." "What happened to us?" Jake asked. "I mean, after I went into cryo sleep. Are there any other humans left?" Veltar's crest lowered slightly, a sign of sadness. "We have found no trace of living humans in over 200 years. You may be the last of your species." Jake felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. He had expected this, but hearing it, confirmed, was still difficult. Everyone he had ever known was gone. Earth, the colonies, his friends, his family, all dust now. "I'm sorry," Veltar continued. "I know this must be very hard for you. I'll manage," Jake said quietly. "I have to." Over the following days, Jake learned more about the galaxy he had awakened to. The Zephyrians were part of something called the Galactic Cooperation Council, a loose alliance of different species that worked together for trade and mutual protection. There were dozens of different races, each with their own worlds and cultures. "We would like to take you to our homeworld," Veltar told him during one of their daily conversations. "Our science council is very interested in meeting you. They have many questions about human history and culture." Jake agreed readily. He was curious about Zephyrian society, and he needed to learn how to live in this new galaxy. The journey to the Zephyrian homeworld took 6 days, during which Jake spent his time learning their language and customs. The planet was called Zephyr Prime, and it was beautiful. Blue oceans covered most of the surface, dotted with green continents that sparkled with cities. The atmosphere was clean and fresh, and the gravity was comfortable for Jake's human physiology. Commander Nixoval met them at the spaceport. He was older than Captain Veltar, with silver-edged scales and a formal manner. As head of the Interspecies Relations Division, he was responsible for managing contact with other species. "Welcome to Zephyr Prime, Jake Morrison," Commander Nixoval said in carefully pronounced English. "We are honored to have you here." Jake was taken to a comfortable apartment in the capital city. The room was large and airy, with a view of the ocean. The Zephyrians had done their best to make it suitable for human needs, providing furniture sized for his smaller frame and food that his digestive system could handle. Dr. Renka was assigned to be his guide and cultural advisor. She was a xenobiologist who specialized in studying different species. She was younger than the others with bright green scales and an enthusiastic manner. "I have read everything we have about humans," she told him excitedly during their first meeting. "But having a real human to talk to is amazing. There is so much we don't understand about your species." Jake found himself enjoying these conversations. Dr. Renka was intelligent and curious, and she asked thoughtful questions about human society and psychology. He told her about Earth's cities, about human art and music, about the way families worked in human culture. "Humans sound very different from Zephyrians," Dr. Renka observed. "You seem to be more individual, less focused on group harmony." "I suppose that's true," Jake agreed. "Humans can be quite independent, sometimes too independent for our own good." As the days passed, Jake began to feel more comfortable on Zephyr Prime. The Zephyrians were genuinely kind people, and they seemed to have built a peaceful and prosperous society. Their cities were clean and efficient. Their technology was advanced but not overwhelming, and their culture valued learning and cooperation. But Jake was not just a passive guest. He was naturally curious, and he asked many questions about Zephyrian society. How did their government work? What kind of military did they have? How did they produce their food and energy? What were their relationships with other species like? Dr. Renka was happy to answer most of his questions. She took him on tours of museums and cultural centers, showed him how Zephyrian families lived, and explained their history and traditions. She seemed to enjoy having someone so interested in her world. "You ask very detailed questions," she commented one day as they visited a technology center. "Are all humans so curious about other cultures?" "I think so," Jake replied. "We always wanted to understand the universe around us. It's probably why we spread out to so many different worlds." Jake also spent time learning about the other species in the galaxy. The Galactic Cooperation Council included dozens of different races, each with their own strengths and specialties. Some were traders, others were explorers, and a few were known for their military might. "Are there any conflicts between species?" Jake asked during one of his conversations with Commander Nixful. "Sometimes," the commander admitted, "but we try to resolve disagreements through negotiation and compromise. The Council has kept major wars from breaking out for over 400 years. "That's impressive," Jake said. "Humans never managed to achieve that level of cooperation." "Perhaps that is why your species faced such difficulties," Commander Nixful suggested gently. Jake nodded, but privately he wondered if the Zephyrians were being naive. In his experience, peace was usually temporary. There were always those who wanted more power, more resources, more territory. The question was not whether conflict would come, but when and from where. After 3 weeks on Zephyr Prime, Jake had settled into a comfortable routine. He spent his mornings with Dr. Renka, learning about Zephyrian science and culture. His afternoons were free for personal study and exploration. His evenings were often spent with various Zephyrian officials who wanted to hear his stories about human history. The Zephyrians seemed to view him as a valuable cultural treasure, the last living link to a lost civilization. They were endlessly patient with his questions and generous with their time and resources. Jake began to think that maybe, just maybe, he could build a new life here among these peaceful people. But late at night, when he was alone in his apartment, Jake sometimes felt a strange restlessness. There were things about his past that didn't quite make sense, memories that seemed unclear or incomplete. Sometimes he would catch himself thinking about things that seemed important, but he couldn't quite remember why. He told himself it was just the effects of being in cryo sleep for so long. Memory problems were normal after such a long period of suspended animation. Dr. Yilsha had warned him that some memories might never return completely. Still, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that there was something important he was forgetting, something that might change everything if he could just remember what it was. Security Chief Daxmore was having a very bad week. 3 separate incidents had occurred across Zephyr Prime, each one seemingly unrelated but all equally troubling. The first problem happened at the main power plant outside the capital city. The fluctuation started at 0300 hours, reported Technician Velna, as she showed Daxmore the readings. Everything was normal, then suddenly the output spiked and dropped in a pattern we've never seen before. Daxmore studied the data on the screens. The power plant had operated smoothly for over 50 years without any major problems. The fusion reactors were stable, the distribution networks were well maintained, and the safety systems were among the best in the galaxy. Was anyone near the plant when this happened? Daxmore asked. No unauthorized personnel, Velna replied. All our workers were accounted for. The night shift was running routine maintenance on the secondary systems. Could it have been sabotage? We found no evidence of tampering. The control systems show no signs of intrusion. It's like the plant just decided to malfunction on its own. 2 days later, the second incident occurred. The planet's main communications array, which handled all interstellar messages and data transfers, began experiencing strange interference. The signals would fade in and out without warning, making it difficult to maintain contact with ships in orbit or other worlds in the system. Communications specialist Torix was frustrated when he briefed Daxmore on the problem. We've checked every component twice. The hardware is perfect, the software is running normally, but somehow our signals keep getting disrupted. What kind of disruption? Daxmore asked. It's very specific, Torix explained. Only certain types of data are affected. Military communications, government channels, and technical specifications seem to be the main targets. Personal messages and commercial traffic work fine. Daxmore's crest rose with concern. That doesn't sound like a natural malfunction. No, it doesn't. But we can't find the source of the interference. It's like someone is selectively jamming our most important communications. The third incident was the most serious. Several military databases had suffered what appeared to be minor corruption. Files were still readable, but small sections of data had been altered or deleted. The changes were subtle, the kind that might not be noticed for weeks or months. Database Administrator Kixral was clearly upset when she reported to Daxmore. Someone has been in our systems, she said without preamble. I'm certain of it. What kind of information was targeted? Daxmore asked. Defense protocols, ship specifications, personnel records, and strategic planning documents. Whoever did, this knew exactly what they were looking for. Could it have been done remotely? Impossible. Our military databases are completely isolated from external networks. Someone would need physical access to the terminals to make these changes. Daxmore left the meeting with a growing sense of unease. 3 seemingly unrelated incidents, all affecting critical infrastructure, all happening within the span of a week. His security training told him this was not a coincidence. Meanwhile, Jake Morrison was settling into his routine on Zephyr Prime. His days were filled with cultural exchanges and learning sessions with Dr. Renka. She had arranged for him to have access to the Planetary Information Network so he could research human history and compare it to Zephyrian development. I find it fascinating how differently our species evolved, Jake said during one of their afternoon sessions. Humans developed much more advanced weapons technology, while Zephyrians focused on peaceful applications. Dr. Renka nodded enthusiastically. Yes, your species seemed to have a natural talent for military innovation. Even your civilian technology often had military applications. That's true, Jake agreed. We had to be ready to defend ourselves. The galaxy can be a dangerous place. Jake spent hours each day accessing the Zephyrian databases, supposedly researching the final years of human civilization. He asked detailed questions about galactic politics, trade routes, and technological developments. Dr. Renka was impressed by his thorough approach to learning. You're very systematic in your research, she observed. Most people would focus on the big historical events, but you seem interested in technical details and infrastructure. I was an engineer before I became a pilot, Jake explained. I like to understand how things work. This was partially true. Jake had indeed been trained in engineering, though his specialty was not civilian technology. His real expertise was in identifying weaknesses in enemy systems and exploiting them for tactical advantage. Dr. Renka also noticed that Jake's sleep patterns were unusual. Her monitoring devices showed that he often stayed awake late into the night, and his brain activity during sleep was more active than normal for a human. "Are you having trouble sleeping?" she asked one morning when Jake appeared tired. "Sometimes," Jake admitted. "I have strange dreams, memories from before I went into cryosleep. I think they're not always clear." "That's normal after such a long period in suspended animation," Dr. Renka assured him. "Your brain is still processing the revival experience." What she didn't know was that Jake's late-night activities involved much more than just restless sleep. His apartment had a secure terminal that was connected to the planetary network for his research purposes. Jake had discovered that with careful manipulation, he could access far more information than the Zephyrians intended. His engineering training included advanced computer systems, and he had quickly learned how to navigate Zephyrian networks without leaving obvious traces. Each night, he would carefully explore different databases, mapping the structure of Zephyrian society and technology. Jake was particularly interested in their defense systems. How were their cities protected? What kind of weapons did their military use? How did they coordinate responses to emergencies? Where were their most important facilities located? He told himself he was just curious, that understanding these things would help him integrate better into Zephyrian society. But deep in his mind, something else was driving his research. Something that felt like instinct, like a purpose he couldn't quite remember but couldn't ignore. Investigation specialist Laura Wynn was assigned to look into the recent security incidents. She was known for her methodical approach and her ability to find patterns that others missed. When she began reviewing the timeline of events, something caught her attention. The first incident at the power plant had occurred exactly 1 week after Jake Morrison was granted access to the planetary network. The communications array problem started 2 days later. The database corruption was discovered 3 days after that. Lorwyn pulled up Jake's file and began studying his background. According to the records, he was Lieutenant Jake Morrison of the Earth Defense Force, found in cryosleep aboard a derelict human vessel. He had been revived as a gesture of goodwill and was now living as a guest on Zephyr Prime. But as Lorwyn dug deeper into the historical records, she found some troubling inconsistencies. Jake claimed to have been frozen for 300 years, but the carbon dating of his ship suggested it was actually older than that. His uniform style didn't match the records they had of Earth Defense Force equipment from that time period. Most disturbing of all, when Lorwyn cross-referenced Jake's name with their historical databases, she found a reference to Lieutenant Jake Morrison in a classified file from 350 years ago. According to that record, Jake Morrison had been killed in action during a classified operation. "This doesn't make sense," Lorwyn muttered as she studied the conflicting information. "Either our historical records are wrong, or this human is not who he claims to be." She decided to dig deeper into the mystery. The classified file was heavily encrypted, but Lorwyn had high-level security clearance. What she found made her blood run cold. The file described a secret Earth program called Project Lazarus. According to the limited information available, it was designed to create enhanced soldiers who could operate behind enemy lines for extended periods. The project had been terminated after several test subjects died during the enhancement process. Lieutenant Jake Morrison had been one of the test subjects. He had supposedly died when his enhanced nervous system rejected the modifications. But what if he hadn't died? What if he had been put into cryosleep to stabilize his condition? Lorwyn realized she needed to bring this information to security, Chief Daxmore immediately. If Jake Morrison was not just a lucky survivor but an enhanced human operative, then Zephyr Prime might be in serious danger. At the same time, Dr. Renka was beginning to have her own concerns about Jake. His questions were becoming increasingly specific and technical. He asked about things that seemed odd for someone who was supposedly just trying to understand Zephyrian culture. "Jake, why are you so interested in our power distribution systems?" she asked during one of their sessions. "Just curious," Jake replied with his usual friendly smile. "I'm an engineer, remember? I like to understand how things work." But Dr. Renka was starting to wonder if there was more to it than simple curiosity. Jake's questions were too precise, too focused on potential vulnerabilities. He asked about backup systems, emergency protocols, and fail-safes. These were not the questions of someone making casual conversation. Dr. Renka stared at the neural scan results on her screen for the third time, hoping she had made a mistake. But the evidence was clear. Jake Morrison's brain showed extensive modifications that no natural human should possess. Enhancement patterns in his neural pathways suggested deliberate engineering, the kind that would take years of advanced medical procedures to achieve. Her hands shook slightly as she reached for her communication device to contact Security Chief Daxmore. Just as she was about to make the call, her laboratory door opened and Jake walked in. "Good evening, Dr. Renka," Jake said with his usual friendly smile. "I hope I'm not disturbing you." "Not at all," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. She quickly closed the neural scan display and turned to face him. "What brings you here so late?" "I couldn't sleep again," Jake said, settling into a chair across from her desk. "I've been having more of those strange dreams. I was hoping you might have some advice about dealing with them." Dr. Renka studied his face carefully. Jake looked the same as always, calm and pleasant. But now that she knew what to look for, she could see small signs that something was different. His eyes were too alert for someone who claimed to be having trouble sleeping. His posture was relaxed but ready, like a predator pretending to rest. "What kind of dreams are you having?" she asked. "Memories, I think, about my time in the military. Training exercises, mission briefings, technical procedures." Jake paused, as if trying to remember something important. "There's one dream that keeps repeating. I'm in a laboratory and people in white coats are doing something to me. I can't quite remember what, but it feels significant." Dr. Renka felt her blood turn cold. Jake was describing what sounded like the enhancement process from Project Lazarus. His memories were returning, which meant he would soon remember his true purpose. "That does sound disturbing," she said carefully. "Perhaps we should schedule you for another medical examination. Sometimes memory recovery can cause physical stress." "That's very kind of you," Jake replied. "But I don't think medical attention will help with this particular problem." There was something different in his voice now, a subtle change that made Dr. Renka's skin crawl. Jake was still smiling, but his eyes had gone completely cold. "Jake, I think there's something we need to discuss," she began. "Yes, there is," Jake agreed. "You've been reviewing my neural scans, haven't you? You've discovered that I'm not quite what I appear to be." Dr. Renka's heart began beating faster. "I don't know what you mean." "Please don't lie to me, Dr. Renka. I've grown quite fond of you during our time together. I would hate for our friendship to end badly." Jake's voice remained pleasant, but there was an unmistakable threat underneath the words. Before Dr. Renka could respond, her communication device chimed with an urgent message from Security Chief Daxmore. The text appeared on her screen: "Emergency meeting. Possible security threat. Come immediately." Jake glanced at the message and sighed. "It seems your colleagues have also discovered my secret. How unfortunate." At that moment, investigation specialist Lorwyn was presenting her findings to Security Chief Daxmore in his private office. The evidence was spread across his desk: historical records, classified files, and analysis reports. Project Lazarus was designed to create the perfect deep-cover operative, Lorwyn explained. Enhanced reflexes, improved tactical thinking, modified memory patterns, and most importantly, the ability to blend seamlessly into enemy populations. Daxmore studied the documents with growing alarm. "You're certain that Jake Morrison is one of these enhanced humans?" "The evidence is overwhelming. His ship is older than he claimed, his background doesn't match our historical records, and his behavior patterns suggest extensive conditioning. He's been systematically gathering intelligence about our infrastructure and defenses. But why would Earth send a single operative to infiltrate us? They were losing the war when these programs were developed." Lorwyn pulled up a classified report from the final years of human civilization. This document suggests that Project Lazarus was not intended as a short-term military strategy. It was designed as a long-term survival plan for the human species. She pointed to a section of the report that made Daxmore's blood run cold. According to this analysis, Earth created dozens of these enhanced operatives and placed them in cryo-sleep aboard hidden ships. The plan was to position these agents throughout the galaxy, where they would eventually be discovered and revived by other species. A Trojan horse strategy, Daxmore whispered. Exactly. The operatives would be seen as tragic survivors of a lost civilization. They would be welcomed with sympathy and given access to their host society's most sensitive information. Once they had gathered enough intelligence, they would presumably activate and begin preparing for humanity's return. Daxmore was about to respond when alarms began sounding throughout the security complex. Red lights flashed on his communication panel, indicating multiple emergency situations across the planet. Report, Daxmore barked into his communicator. Diary, voice of communications specialist Torix crackled through the speaker. Sir, we're receiving reports of coordinated attacks on critical infrastructure. The main power plant has gone into emergency shutdown. The planetary defense grid is offline. Multiple government buildings are experiencing system failures. How is this possible? Our security systems should have detected any large-scale assault. That's just it, sir. There are no signs of external attack. All the failures appear to be coming from within our own systems. Lorwyn looked at Daxmore with growing horror. He's not just gathering intelligence. He's already begun the sabotage phase of his mission. Back in Dr. Renka's laboratory, Jake was calmly explaining the situation while she sat frozen in her chair. You have to understand, this isn't personal, Jake said in a conversational tone. I genuinely like you and your people. The Zephyrians are kind, intelligent, and peaceful. Under different circumstances, I would be happy to live among you as a friend. Then why are you doing this? Dr. Renka asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Because I was created for a specific purpose, and that purpose is bigger than my personal feelings. Humanity is not extinct, Dr. Renka. We're just waiting. Jake stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city lights that were beginning to flicker and fail as his sabotage programs took effect. My people are sleeping in hidden ships scattered throughout the galaxy. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. When I was revived, it sent a signal to activate the others. Right now, across dozens of worlds, humans are waking up and beginning their missions. Dr. Renka felt sick. What missions? To prepare for humanity's return. We need to understand the current political situation, identify potential threats and allies, and ensure that when our main fleets arrive, they will face a galaxy that is either friendly or too weakened to resist. But the Zephyrians welcomed you. We helped you. We were friends. Jake turned back to her, and for a moment she saw genuine sadness in his eyes. I know, and I will remember that kindness. But friendship is a luxury that humanity cannot afford right now. We are fighting for our survival as a species. The lights in the laboratory suddenly went out, leaving them in darkness except for the glow of emergency lighting. In the distance, they could hear sirens and the sound of emergency vehicles racing through the streets. You've crippled our entire planet, Dr. Renka said. Not crippled, just temporarily disabled. I've been very careful to avoid causing permanent damage or loss of life. Your infrastructure will recover, though it may take several months. Jake moved toward the door, then paused. Dr. Renka, I want you to know that everything I told you about human culture and history was true. We really were explorers and dreamers and builders. But we were also survivors, and sometimes survival requires us to do things we would prefer not to do. Wait, Dr. Renka called out. Where are you going? To complete my mission. There are still a few systems I need to access before Security Chief Daxmore and his people track me down. Security teams were already mobilizing across Zephyr Prime, but they were hampered by the infrastructure failures Jake had orchestrated. Communications were spotty, transportation was limited, and many of their tracking systems were offline. Daxmore coordinated the search from his emergency command center, using backup systems that had not been compromised. He has to be moving toward the Planetary Defense Center, he told his team. That's the only major system he hasn't targeted yet. Why would he save that for last? Asked one of his officers. Because disabling the planetary defenses would be an act of war, not just sabotage. If he's telling the truth about not wanting to cause permanent damage, he might be planning to leave that system intact. Lorwyn looked up from her analysis station. Or he's saving it for last because it's the most important target. If he can access the defense grid, he could potentially turn our own weapons against us or transmit our defensive capabilities to other human operatives. The truth was more complex than either of them realized. Jake Morrison was indeed heading for the Planetary Defense Center, but not for the reasons they suspected. His mission was almost complete, but there was one final phase that would test everything he had been trained to do. Jake Morrison stood before the entrance to the Planetary Defense Center, his hand hovering over the access panel. Behind him, the city of Zephyr Prime was slowly coming back to life as emergency crews worked to restore the systems he had disabled. The sabotage had been perfect, causing maximum disruption with minimal permanent damage. His mission was almost complete. All he needed to do was access the defense grid's central computer and download the specifications for Zephyrian military technology. This information would be transmitted to other human operatives throughout the galaxy, giving humanity a crucial advantage when their fleets eventually returned. But Jake hesitated. The faces of the Zephyrians he had come to know kept appearing in his mind. Dr. Renka's enthusiasm when she taught him about her culture, Captain Veltar's dignity and kindness, Commander Nixvol's patient efforts to make him feel welcome. These people had done nothing to deserve what was about to happen to their species. Behind him, Jake heard the sound of approaching vehicles. Security Chief Daxmore and his team had finally tracked him down. Jake could have easily avoided them, but part of him was almost relieved that the chase was over. "Jake Morrison," Daxmore's voice called out through a speaker. "You are surrounded. Please step away from the defense center and surrender peacefully." Jake turned to see a dozen security vehicles positioned around the plaza. Zephyrian officers had taken cover behind their transports, weapons drawn but not yet aimed at him. Even now they were trying to resolve this without violence. "I don't want to hurt anyone," Jake called back, "but I have a job to finish." "Your job is to betray the people who saved your life?" Daxmore stepped out from behind his vehicle, his hands visible and empty. "The people who welcomed you as a friend?" "My job is to ensure the survival of my species," Jake replied. "Just as you would do anything to protect the Zephyrians." Dr. Renka's voice came through the speakers next. "Jake, please listen to me. You don't have to do this. We can find another way." Jake felt something twist in his chest when he heard her voice. She had come here, despite knowing how dangerous he was, because she still believed there was good in him. "There is no other way," Jake said, though his voice lacked conviction. "This is what I was created for." "You're more than your programming," Dr. Renka insisted. "I've seen who you really are, the person who was fascinated by our art, who asked thoughtful questions about our culture, who laughed at our stories. That person was real, Jake. He's still real." Jake closed his eyes for a moment, remembering the weeks he had spent learning about Zephyrian society. Those had been some of the happiest moments of his life, even though he hadn't realized it at the time. "Even if that's true," Jake said, "it doesn't change what I have to do. Hundreds of other operatives are already active across the galaxy. If I don't complete my mission, someone else will." "Then be the first to choose a different path," Dr. Renka said. "Show the galaxy that humans can be partners instead of conquerors." Jake turned back to the access panel. His enhanced reflexes could get him inside the defense center before the Zephyrian security forces could stop him. His conditioning told him to complete the mission, to download the data and transmit it to the human fleet. But Dr. Renka's words echoed in his mind. Investigation Specialist Lorwyn spoke up from her position behind one of the vehicles. "Jake, we know about Project Lazarus. We know you were conditioned to see this as your only option. But you have a choice now." "Do I?" Jake asked. "Every decision I make, every thought I have, how do I know what's really me and what's just my programming?" "Because you're questioning it," Dr. Renka said softly. "Your programming would never allow you to doubt your mission. The fact that you're hesitating proves that there's something real inside you, something human that no amount of conditioning could erase." Jake's hand moved toward the access panel, then stopped. He thought about the signal he had already sent to wake up the other sleeper agents. Across the galaxy, humans were emerging from cryosleep on dozens of worlds, beginning their own missions of infiltration and sabotage. It's too late, Jake said. Even if I stop, the others won't. Humanity is already returning, and when they do, there will be war. Maybe, Daxmore said, stepping closer. But war isn't inevitable if we have time to prepare. If we know what's coming, we can try to find a peaceful solution. You want me to betray my own species? I want you to help prevent a galactic war, Daxmore replied. Help us understand the human plan. Tell us how to contact your leaders. Give us a chance to negotiate before the shooting starts. Jake laughed bitterly. You don't understand. The humans who are coming aren't interested in negotiation. They've spent 3 centuries planning their return, and they see the current galactic civilization as something that needs to be conquered or destroyed. But you don't have to agree with them, Dr. Renka said. You've seen what we've built. Here. You know we're not your enemies. Jake stared at the access panel for a long moment, then slowly stepped back. If I help you, I'll be a traitor to everything I was created to be. If you don't help us, you'll be responsible for the deaths of billions of innocent people, Lorwyn pointed out. The truth of that statement hit Jake like a physical blow. He thought about all the peaceful species in the galaxy, all the civilizations that had never done anything to harm humanity. They would be caught in the middle of a war they didn't understand, fighting for their lives against an enemy they had tried to help. What do you want me to do? Jake asked quietly. First, step away from the defense center, Daxmore said. Then come with us. We need to know everything about the human plan, and we need to figure out how to contact the other operatives before they complete their missions. Jake took a deep breath and walked away from the building. As he approached the security team, he raised his hands to show he was surrendering. Several officers moved forward to restrain him, but Daxmore waved them back. No restraints, Daxmore said. He's made his choice. Over the following days, Jake worked closely with Zephyrian intelligence to map out the human strategy. He provided locations of other sleeper ships, identified potential targets for sabotage, and explained the conditioning process that all the operatives had undergone. The key is to approach them before they complete their missions, Jake explained during one of their planning sessions. Once an operative finishes gathering intelligence, they go into deep cover mode and become almost impossible to detect. Can you communicate with them? Asked Commander Nixfall. There are emergency protocols, but using them would expose my location to the human fleet. I'm probably already considered a traitor for not completing my mission. Dr. Renka looked up from her notes. What will happen when the main human force arrives? They'll expect detailed intelligence reports from all the operatives. When they don't receive them, they'll know something went wrong. That might make them more cautious, or it might make them more aggressive. The Galactic Cooperation Council was notified of the situation, and emergency sessions were called on dozens of worlds. Some species wanted to hunt down the human operatives immediately, while others argued for attempting diplomatic contact with the returning human fleets. The humans are acting out of desperation, Jake told the assembled representatives during a secure video conference. They believe they're fighting for survival. If you approach them with understanding instead of hostility, there might be a chance for peace. And if there isn't, asked a representative from the Altarian Confederacy, then at least you'll be prepared for what's coming. 3 months later, Jake sat in a comfortable room in the Zephyrian capital, staring out at the ocean. He had been given a choice about his future. He could remain on Zephyr Prime as an advisor, helping to prepare for humanity's return. He could try to contact the human fleets directly and attempt to negotiate. Or he could simply disappear, finding some quiet corner of the galaxy where he could live out his life in peace. Dr. Renka entered the room carrying 2 cups of the herbal tea that Jake had grown fond of during his recovery. Any word from the council? Jake asked. They've managed to make contact with 17 of the human operatives, she reported. Most of them are willing to listen, though a few have gone into hiding rather than cooperate. That's better than I expected. There's also news from the Outer Rim. Long-range sensors have detected ships heading toward the galaxy. They match the energy signatures you described for human vessels. Jake felt his stomach tighten. After all these months of preparation, the moment of truth was finally approaching. How long do we have? 6 months, maybe 7. Jake nodded slowly. Dr. Renka, I want you to know that I'm grateful for everything you and your people have done. For me, you saved more than my life. You saved my soul. She smiled and placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. You saved yourself, Jake. We just gave you the chance to remember who you really were. Outside the window, the sun was setting over the Zephyrian ocean, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and gold. It was beautiful, peaceful, and worth protecting. Jake Morrison had been created as a weapon, designed to help humanity reclaim the galaxy through force. But he had chosen to become something else, a bridge between species, a voice for peace in a galaxy preparing for war.